Perfect. Okay. Namaste and welcome, everyone. It is me, Nina Sachs from Yoga Awakening Africa, and today I get to speak with a really interesting, fascinating, and delightful Amanda Blair from Limited Edition of One. Amanda, welcome. So good to be here and to be chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. That's an amazing introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
I know we got introduced to each other through a mutual friend, Glenda, who I absolutely love and adore. She's just such a kind of like just a magical woman. And I think there are a lot of listeners who have come across her, or they've maybe seen her interview that I've done with her as well. And when she said, Anina, I think you need to get in contact with Amanda, I was like, okay, cool. Like, if Glenda suggests that, then let's do that. And we had a chat about probably a month ago, and it was just so interesting to find out like a little bit more about you, your journey, and how you started your company of this limited edition of One, because I really love that because it just speaks to one's uniqueness. Like we're all completely unique, we're all special, we're all here on earth for our life's purpose. So we were chatting about that, and then your other project that you've got going on, which is Mind Safari. So with my whole long intro, and, would you want to give everyone maybe just like a quick short recap on like how you got into the work you're doing, and why limited edition of One?
Sure, yeah. So my background is really corporate communication, and that's where I spend a lot of my working life. So that's working on communication strategy and content for brands, for international companies. And it's also had an element in that that's grown over the year, which I'm going to call kind of education. So that's training, that could be training teams in companies, but it's also been a lot of lecturing at universities in Europe and in Southern Africa about the communication toolkit, about intercultural communication, and all those goodies that are on curriculums. And I think really my interest in the individual has grown very progressively during that time. And I've always been fascinated about what made people different. And my own story in that way is probably I haven't lived where I was born and brought up for very much of my life. So I've always been that kind of fish out of water, which I found with time is a bit of a superpower. Although it's really tough along the way sometimes, that feeling of not fitting in, I've often come to the conclusion that that kind of makes you. So being more and more intrigued by that, I qualified as a transformational coach, and of uniqueness. So it can still be a brand, and looking into that aspect. But often it is about the individual, what makes them different every day in terms of what they do, what they say, who they connect with, their stories, and looking through coaching or also through an interactive workbook that I published in 2020 about what we can get out of who we are. That's where I am today, so working in that space.
Lovely. I love it. I love it, Amanda. And how about just like delving into quickly on like Mind Safaris and what that is? Because you were just saying you've got such a gorgeous group at the moment going with that, such inspiring people.
Yes.
And so what is Mind Safaris and why do you love it?
All right. So Mind Safari is part of the limited edition of One portfolio, really. It's something that I run. It's a group of 6 workshops. Tend to be 6 people as well. Normally, I like to keep it small. And in those workshops, which are online, 6 people who have totally different backgrounds. They're from all over the world, different ages, different jobs, genders, everything. We come together and look at topics that are common to us. So that could be something like time, it could be communication. And we discuss through creativity tasks, through reflection exercises, through individual kind of coaching between participants, what that topic means to us and how we could use it in our daily lives. It's kind of a community that grows by the end of the 6 workshops. But the focus, again, is all about how are we different and what that can bring if we get together with other people who are like that, who are living out their differentness. So it's something that never turns out the way I expect it to. And I've got so used to that I really love it. And often the communities that grow during the 6 sessions stay. So you have kind of a network of almost like private coaches by the end of it, who you can bounce things off, who will not judge them in any way. So it goes in all directions, and each one is definitely a limited edition of one. But it's something that I just absolutely love moderating. I can't explain how great I find being part of it. So that's why I was talking to you about it before we pressed record, because I love it so much.
That's so great to hear. And there's so much benefit I find when people come together in a group, because there's so much joint wisdom that is shared. And, you know, some people come into a group and they don't think, well, I don't have like expertise or experience in this. And I was just saying, you know, sometimes it's just your life experience and what you've gone through with life, which can be super helpful to someone else who's maybe hasn't gone through that or is about to go through that. And you being that understanding person can be super helpful. So when it comes to these groups that you're running with Mind Safari, like what are some of the benefits as you've picked up over the years of hosting these? Like what has come out of it? I'm intrigued.
I mean, benefit for me is just purely to watch people grow, which I just find phenomenal. I can only talk about the benefits from the feedback I get. I think people go on their own journeys and their very private journeys after the Mind Safaris. But we've had people who've perhaps explored a creative channel that they haven't thought of exploring before. We've had people, or actually, I shouldn't say people because it's not plural, it's different for everyone. So we had somebody who was a very fast-paced business woman in this case, but that's not so relevant, who kind of found a different pace through the Mind Safaris and applied that in her communication and really took quite significant moves in her career after it. We've also had a lady who was just going to the retirement phase and thinking, is this kind of an end of my identity? And through the group work, found actually this is an amazing new chapter that's opening up, and got inputs from people. And one of the conversations within her cohort was with somebody who was a 20-year-old artist who gave such valuable inputs. And as I touched on before, those two people perhaps wouldn't come together normally, but it was showing what inspiration can come from people who have nothing in common with you apparently, but actually intrinsically may do. So it goes all over the shop. And as I said, I think some of the reflection between the sessions and afterwards can be very, very significant for people as they go on their development journey of just being who they are, about shedding the let's fit in kind of scenario, which many of us grow up with or uneducated in. So it can go anywhere, I think.
Yeah, lovely. And I suppose that's also when you create that structure and that safe space, you allow for expansion and possibility to form, and that can then move like out of the structure you've created, and it can like take all that chaos or all the potential that is still outside of the structure, and you now are able to formulate it into a little bit more of a structure for yourself. I don't know if I'm like going very much like into yoga talk here, but I just find that, like, you know, when we have a little bit of a structure, when there's someone who's facilitating it like you can build or have the option for space and possibilities to arise that maybe normally wouldn't, because now you've got people in there that, like you're saying, the 20-year-old and the 60-year-old, they probably wouldn't have met on you know, a random day in their lives, you know, but because they were there for a specific purpose, something was able to be created and formulated. Do you manage to... Okay, sorry, carry on. Yes.
No, I just love that. I wanted to pick up on something you said about the space and creating that space. I love that because I often just sit alone reflecting after the mind safaris and think, okay, why does this work? And I think that that is a key word, giving people the space. Sometimes I question why we don't have that space more generally, but that's another topic. But it's about really listening and having that kind of opportunity within those, I was going to say four walls, and it's online, so it's not four walls, but it's the equivalent of a room where you can move about with your thoughts and your ideas. And it's, yeah, I could imagine you're the yoga expert, but it's like being in that studio where you feel totally at ease to develop as who you are and how you are physically and mentally. So yeah, I can see the parallel there. That's just what I wanted to say.
Love it, love it. And so, Amanda, do you manage to like follow up and stay in touch with a lot of the people who've joined your courses and see like how the cohort has shifted and moved them, or like what kind of happens after the 6 weeks?
So I'm getting predictable now, but I'm going to say every cohort is different. But one of the things that happens quite a lot is that the momentum will be set from somebody in the group saying, I would like to continue this community. I don't push that, that's their momentum. And I'm usually part of it, not always. I wait again to see if I'm invited to be part of it, but quite often I am. And people tend to share their experiences afterwards, which is fantastic. So if someone's given a particularly difficult presentation and had a success with it, they'll put comments on that, and they'll say how they felt it went. They'll share their success factors in it. Or also people who are struggling with something and say they're looking for a job and have had a rejection. They will sometimes go to that group that we set up afterwards just to share that experience. And again, I've thought about that a lot, and why is it that people use it for that? Because I mean, a lot of the people, of course, have got friends and families they could talk to about that. But I think another of the key points after space that you mentioned is trust and lack of judgment.
Yeah.
So I don't give loads of rules of mind safaris at all. But in the first session, I do say, hey, there's no wrong or right in here. There's no wrong or right in life, really, within certain framework. So I think people just don't feel that if they actually share something in there, someone's going to say, oh, yeah, but that job sounds as though it's got a terrible commute attached to it. Or I knew someone who worked there and I wouldn't do that. Or there's no kind of between the lines, are you sure you want to do that? It's just neutrality. So I guess we perhaps don't have that in our daily lives. It can be for a positive reason. Our friends are on our side, you know, they're not neutral. And it's just lovely to see how they support each other afterwards. Yeah.
That's such a valid point, because if we do often ask our close friends or family for advice, they'll often come with their own perception as to like how we should feel or what would be good for us. Whereas if we're going into a very neutral group where they actually are solely there for your own benefit and not what it could mean for them,
Yes.
as the third party, I think it's really, really helpful being part of groups like these. Again, like a question with members who join, are a lot of them like first time members who've never like done in being part of any groups before, or do you find a lot of them have actually been a part of some form of groups in the past? And yeah, so anyway, is this like something new to most of them, is pretty much where I'm getting to, or is it kind of like something that is quite foreign and different to them?
It tends to be quite new because it's also a leap of faith. I think many of the courses that you see advertised, I'll say these are the objectives, this is what we do in what am I doing? And I'm a little bit worried about this. So there's kind of like first night nerves about it. They've perhaps done group work in other areas, but it's been more specific and it's been more goal driven. But having said that, I've been doing this for a few years now, and we're starting to get repeats. So that's actually lovely for me. And I'll be really honest, I hadn't thought of that. I thought it probably was something you did once, but I've had people come back and say, oh, I'm at a new kind of crossroads at the moment. I'm looking at a change, for example. can I do another series? And I went, yeah, of course you can, absolutely, because they're all different. Some of the themes may come up in various workshops, but people get different things out of it a second time. So yes, both. But I think largely it's quite a new experience for people, which makes it extremely difficult to describe.
Yes,
But,
I can imagine, because there's not, I think that's where I struggled when I first chatted with you. I was like, what is this thing? Like,
yeah,
like, how do you explain it? Like, what actually is it? But like you're saying, every group is unique, and they all kind of like go from their A to B. There's all that, it sounds like there's that sense of support and structure, and that there's the option of continuing. What is interesting to me within you speaking is like, that there are now, after a couple of years, like people who are like want to repeat it and are saying that, it is so beneficial that they want to be part of the group or a group again, or go through that process.
yeah.
So is it something that you would maybe turn into like a long-term group membership thing, or do you think you're going to just keep them like small?
I think the group size, well, I've actually had 8. That's probably the biggest I've had. I think that group size works really well because people trust each other. Also, people commit then to the 6 sessions. And I think if you have too much fluctuation, like people popping in and out, it's difficult to follow for them, and it's difficult to know how much they can share or what was shared in the last session. So it's a great question. I think in terms of scalability, I'd probably keep it relatively small. But this was obviously born in the pandemic phase of our lives. So I am doing more kind of real retreats or real kind of workshops now, where we get together as a small group, and it's a mind safari concept in a way, although it's very different, because I think the fact that people don't meet on the mind safari is also quite helpful to some of them.
Okay.
It's adding to that safe space, but there are going to be more physical workshops coming up, but probably not going to be much bigger than 8 or 10 people, I would think. Because they want my attention as well. And I'll be honest, I feel I can't do that if there's more than that group number. It feels too big. It then feels like a lecture. It doesn't feel as interactive for me. It's very personal.
Yeah. And tell me, Amanda, like, where does this idea of uniqueness, where did that originate from you? Like, why is that so important? It's like such an important concept for you. And
I
like,
think I'll be honest, it was my
everyone. So
I think
go ahead.
it's, I mean, I'm not sort of preaching that it's different for everyone, but I think it was probably born of quite a difficult journey, which was mine, which was having lived abroad all the time. I did think I had to fit in, because when you go to a foreign culture, the way I was brought up, it was this kind of idea that, you're not there to disrupt things. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, was often the quotation that was used. And it was disrespectful to kind of bodge in there and be you in a very loud and unpleasant way. But I kind of dug deeper and realized, as I tried that fitting in kind of behavior, that not only was it really tough, because I'm never going to be as good as a Roman or as good or the same as them, it was also not bringing out the best in me, that I could contribute to the larger community. And I found in my living abroad phases that, people have been curious about where I'm from, what I do, particularly having, well, when you're living somewhere where English isn't the native language, people are like, oh, can I practice my English, whatever it is. But it's those stories that make you different, that do actually appeal to people. And of course, respect always has to be in there, no doubt about that. And then I kind of got more and more involved in researching the topic of sort of uniqueness, and how we try to conform and what it damages in that uniqueness sometimes. And my work in education as well often showed that, of course, it's understandable school has to have a system. It can't let absolutely everybody do their own thing. That's not what I'm suggesting. But we can't all be measured on the same scale. Success will mean something different to everybody. So again, in the education system, it's about perhaps giving people space to develop what makes them who they are. And it can be something that really does turn out to be a success factor for really the uniqueness that I talk about in all my work, be that coaching, Mind Safari, and the writing I do. It's very basic. I call it daily differentness. What makes you different every day? What are you born with that other people are maybe not born with? And it's the only thing we've actually got on board is our uniqueness. That's a guarantee. And then I think it's not, I think uniqueness itself is almost perceived as you've got to be crazy, you've got to be the best, you've got to be the biggest, the tallest, the most beautiful, the whatever. And it's about breaking that down and saying, what makes you interesting? And example of like if you were interviewing a Nobel Prize winner, you're not going to spend all the people are not going to find the interview so interesting if you find out things that they could have looked up on the internet. But it is those little stories about that person, what breakfast cereal did they like as a kid? What did they get into trouble for at school? What's their favorite flower and why? Whatever it is, that's kind of what sticks. And we kind of assume these people have got an amazing track record academically. But what makes them them? I think even at that level is going to be the most interesting thing. So, yep, daily differentness is
Daily
my
differentness. I
word.
love that. So
Yeah.
you've totally piqued my interest, and I kind of like have two questions. One, just like curiosity, because I can't remember from when we first chatted, is like where did you grow up, and like where have you traveled to and from? And because I know that at the moment you're in Cape Town, I'm in Zim, so that's why my background's different, because we're both traveling, but you're kind of more or less based in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken, at the moment. So what is where did you grow up? Where did you grow up, Amanda?
Okay. Where did I grow up? I haven't grown up yet, but I'll
Okay,
still try and ask
how
you
are
a
you busy
question.
growing up so far in the process?
So I spent my childhood in England. I think if that answers the question. So yeah, as daughter of two quite free-spirited parents, so they were very encouraging in terms of creativity and art and people doing what they needed to and wanted to do. But then after that, I went into the automotive industry. So that took me working all over the place. I was then based in Germany for quite a long time. So I did some more growing up there. And then into the watch industry. And a lot of my work has been outside where I grew up from, as I mentioned. But the watch industry, that's probably a bit of a clue that took me to Switzerland, the home of watchmaking. But having said that, since I've been in Switzerland, which is quite a while now, I tend to have worked for multinationals. So they've been companies that are perhaps based in Switzerland, but talking to an international audience. So it's involved a huge amount of travel all over the place. So I think one of my passions actually is talking about the concept of home. And if you ask me where home is, it's a very, very difficult question for me to answer. I tend to like the definition that I came across, which is it's where you can be who you are, unsurprisingly. And yes, you touched on South Africa. I absolutely love Cape Town, spend an awful lot of time in Cape Town. The reason I first came here work-wise was actually for an organization called SIBA, which is business school in Cape Town, which takes in, I think, I'm going to get told off if I get the number wrong, but they have around 400 scholarship students who get a business administration, so a bachelor's business administration qualification. And I started volunteering for them about 6 or 7 years ago. So that was kind of one of the reasons for my love, but it's just kind of a place where I come and within minutes feel at home. So I think I have many homes emotionally, but I think if I had to define a physical home, it probably would be Cape Town, but there are other places where I love to be as well.
Yeah.
What does home mean for you? Can I add you to my research? How would you
You
define home?
can. I was just thinking, it probably also means, or could be like, where does your soul, your spirit, or certain parts of you feel comfortable? Because we're so multidimensional, I think, that not every, that there's not going to be one space that is going to speak to every part of us, or that is going to be comforting to every part, I suppose. And so like you're saying, maybe your creativity, maybe that needs a home somewhere. And maybe, your heart needs a home somewhere else. And maybe kind of like where you feel physically well, and strong. Like for me, like physically, I feel really strong in Mozambique. I like the weather there. I have the time and the space that allows me to really work on my health. I love to travel, so my soul feels free when it can move about freely and travel a lot. Home, like where my family is, that's mainly Cape Town, because that's where my family is, and we grew up with such a strong family structure that I love that. But like I was saying, I think that we're so multidimensional, and that there are different parts of a city, the world, wherever, that maybe can nurture and nourish each of those parts in a different way. And so maybe that's why some of us like to travel.
I love that. I'm going to make some notes about that afterwards. Thank you. I'm doing this huge research informally around home because people have such different perceptions. But I love that one. Yeah. You have different bits of us need different homes, maybe. Quite true.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
and at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is like, we need to feel comfortable in ourselves and with ourselves, because when we can feel at home in us, we can live anywhere in the world and it can feel like home. But we need to feel at home within ourselves. And I think that's why,
Yes.
like, physically we need to feel strong, mentally we need to feel strong, like spiritually we need to feel strong, we need to have, like, our creativity needs to be supported, like all aspects of us need to be supported. And when we can do that, I think that we feel whole, and then we can be anywhere and feel at home.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I agree. I think I love the portable concept of it. I'm also fascinated by people who have grown up somewhere, stayed there, and feel so rooted there. I think that's beautiful as well. I think it's something that I think has got as many definitions as people, which is why I love asking you. So thank you for your input.
and just like thinking of like the Ayurvedic perspective, because I don't know how well versed or much you know about that, but in Ayurveda we talk about like 3 doshas. So you've got like the Vata, which is air and ether. You've got Pitta, which is mainly like fire and a little bit of water, and then Kapha, which is a lot of earth and water. And so if you think of like those elements, the Vatas, and I've got a lot of Vasha in me, which is a lot of air and ether. So we're very much kind of like out there and movable, and things are changing and we get excited quickly. And so I think that's why I enjoy, moving a lot. And we need the earth and the stability to help ground us. And then if you think of someone like who's got like a lot of earth and water in them, the kapha energy, they are very like solid. If you think of like a mountain, like, they're quite solid. So it might also be interesting in the research looking like the person who is feeling really, really solid, like with where they are and they haven't like moved much, they probably Ayurvedically have like a lot of earth and water in them, and feel quite rooted and sorted at home. So
I need to look into that more. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
awesome. And then to kind of like move towards like wrapping up, I love that you were talking about daily differences. When we look at like how, like what makes me unique, what makes me stand out, what makes me different from anyone else, like why am I special? I'm sure like a lot of people come to you, and like with a lot of the work that you've done in corporate and in the corporate field as well, is like, how does one figure out like what is one's unique aspect? And so talking about these daily differences, you were saying like each day, were you saying like, write a list each day of like what comes up, or how do you look at these daily differences? Like how does someone start working at figuring out what their unique aspects are if they've maybe always been told or listened to by others, like, this makes you you. Like how do you slowly start to listen within and figuring out like what makes you unique?
So I break it down into real bite-sized pieces, and that's whether I'm dealing in a big corporate training room or whether it's an individual coaching. That can take many forms. Quite often I look at it thematically, which is what the book limited edition of one does. So we look at a topic, for instance, one of the topic in there is sleep, which sounds really strange maybe initially. But that's opening up this kind of magical world of, a dream that you maybe had, or if you could have a bedroom that was exactly expressing yourself, what would it be? Or just kind of going on an imagination trip around a topic that's very generic. Everybody sleeps. One is childhood, one is possessions. What's the possession that you really, really would grab in a fire, and why would that be? Or if you had to give away a possession every day for the next 10 days, what are the possessions that you might look at? Or what do those things mean to you? And by doing that, it's kind of like a warm-up in an exercise class. People kind of don't notice in the process, but they're saying things that nobody else would say. And then we get to the point where we say, okay, so that is your story. You have got many stories, and then we build on that. It's like a confidence building based on that realization that, hey, nobody had that conversation with the guy in the coffee shop this morning that I did. Nobody looked at the clouds and saw a poodle was the one we talked about, I think, together. So once you have that kind of basis of, hey, this is who I am, it's not who anyone else is, we build from there and look at what potential lies in the fact that you're different to everyone else.
Amazing. And that is what the work is all about when working with Amanda. So
It's fun. It's very, very playful, because I really do think if we could possibly learn the way kids learn, we're going to be on a very, very good track. But most of us lose that when we're about 7 years old. So yes, I teach people to be 7-year-olds. That should be my new slogan.
Yeah, and it's so important because what was that stat from? I mean, I remember reading it years ago, like kids laugh like, I don't know, 40 times a day, or you need to be laughing that amount a day and to stay healthy. And like adults, if you get like 7 laughs out of them a day, that is a lot. It was something ridiculous. I don't know if you remember reading that study. But it's like we really do need to get back to being a kid and just having fun and playful, I think.
Playful learning, I think it sticks, doesn't it? If you're enjoying it, it sticks, and
Yes.
that's great. Yeah, and it's very, very true of personal development. If you're enjoying it, you're probably going to see results. If you're kind of on January the 2nd thinking, oh, why did I say I'd give up cookies? Yeah, maybe not the track to go down. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so true. It's playful learning. Like if we all think back, to like school days and teachers, it's probably those teachers had the most impact where we enjoyed ourselves in the class or the lesson or something that stood out. And it's, where everything was like too regimented and boring and didn't really, yeah, I don't think really helped much for learning. I remember being at school and just being bored out of my mind because it wasn't stimulating enough. It wasn't fun, I suppose.
Wasn't space for you to be unique. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the lovely thing. Like as adults, we get to go and play with that a little now as well. And we get to move into that space of learning, and instead of feeling that it needs to be completely formal and structural, maybe that we can bring that element of creativity and playfulness into it. And that is more beneficial, possibly, if we've been doing something the other way our whole lives than not. So
Absolutely. And can bring very concrete results. I think that's something that obviously I have to explain in a corporate situation. It's not, when you say having fun, that doesn't mean it's a waste of time by any means. You can improve whatever it is, your bottom line, your creative thinking in a team, your intercultural understanding within your organization. That can result from that. So it's not sort of messing around with Play-Doh. It actually can have quite serious results. Yeah, serious in a fun way.
yeah, I love that. I love that, Amanda. So as we kind of like wrap up, any last thoughts, closing ideas, anything you want to maybe leave the listeners with, or me with, to think of?
I think something very simple, like, you know, if your attention is kind of caught by the fact that there's perhaps untapped uniqueness potential in you, which I'm sure there is in all of us, just have a think about it, like before you go to bed tonight or whatever, and think, what did I do today that was different, you know, than anyone else? What's kind of special about me in some other way? Just to reflect a little bit on their uniqueness in a very casual, non-achievement driven way, and then just play with that moving forward. What are you going to do tomorrow that may be different? What did you do in your childhood that was different? What do you see around you that's different? Just take in your everyday world with your lens. I think that's all I would want people to spend their time doing.
So interesting, Amanda, because I'm just like in a new place, obviously, because it's Craig's son's house. And I like, you know, walk through the house and I just think, well, I would like possibly move the furniture this way and this way. Like I would set, you know, the whole house up, not the whole house, but you know, a certain room a little differently than what it is. And I suppose that's exactly what you're speaking to, is you're just picking up, like, you know, where's your uniqueness? What is different about you? Whereas like Craig will walk in and he wouldn't even think about that. Whereas me, I'm walking in and I'm like, oh, that would be quite pretty if those pictures would be there and that.
Absolutely. And there's so much material that we have on board, which makes it very accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is such a good point. It's like, we don't need to wait for a time when we can actually do this right now. Like you're saying, like we can take action right now. We don't have to wait for the big, like, aha or lightning bolts, you know, slap down thing. It's actually go out into the garden and just notice what you see.
Absolutely. And I think actually uniqueness in my definition of it is a muscle. So you just have to kind of exercise it and use it. And that can be a very small amount of exercise each day, but it's got to be present. Yeah.
I don't know why this comes up to me, but it's kind of like if you had a group of people, I'm just thinking like of the family, and we all go outside and we look at the rose bush. And everyone were to take their phone and you were to say, okay, take a picture of the rose bush that inspires you. Everyone's picture is going to come out different. It's still the exact same rose bush, but everyone's picture is going to be completely different. No one's going to take exactly the same picture. And so anyway, I don't know why that thought or that image came to me, but it did. Yeah.
In this unique moment, you froze.
In my sorry, my internet.
That's a brilliant example. And yes, you'll get people who will zoom in on something, on a thorn. You'll get people who do the big picture. You'll get people who will lie down, stand up, everything. And every one of those pictures is valid and beautiful. Yeah.
I think that is just like a perfect note to end on. So Amanda, thank you so much.
The poetic rose bush. Thank you for that. Lovely to talk to you, Nina. Thank you so much.
Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much.